what is going on out there, lacrosse fans and sports bettors alike? We're back. 1 week hiatus. There were vacations to be had, and there were tickets to be cashed. You're listening to Bet On Lacrosse, where, as aforementioned, we're not only aiming to cash those tickets, we're looking to make you each and every week a better. If you don't know by now, I'm your host, Dan Alexander. You can get me on Twitter at Newbie Talks, and joining me yet again is my guy. He's rocking the throwback Sixers gear. He's got the fresh cut up top, fresh off of a nice vacation. You know him. You love him. Brian Andrews joining the show. Brian, how we doing, my man?
Doing great. Feeling really refreshed after a vacation. Really happy to be back, though. I'm ready to get back at it after missing last week.
Man, so you and Hutton just the doldrums of winter, perfect time to be going to some warmer spots. We actually, you in the Philly area, me as well, some damn good weather today, and we're right back into it being godly, unfreezingly cold, and I'm sick of it, and I'm ready for spring. So spring lacrosse can truly be here. I'm ready for summer, so summer league can be here, but the NLL rolls on. The indoor league still ticking along, and a lot of action. Brian's going to be chatting about that here in just a few seconds. We're also going to get into maybe a potential hedge opportunity. The alarm is going off. There's a team with some pretty long odds in the NLL to win the title that may or may not have some value that you can cash in on. We'll get into that. We're going to run down some results of what it's been happening in the field side of things with the NCAA. We have results from every week, every line that has been available. I have painstakingly tracked so that I can let you know who's covering the spread, who is covering the money line. Spoiler alert, favorites. Eat that chalk, folks. We talked about your potential parlay opportunities, and we'll get into that a little bit more when we run down those. We're also going to unveil a new segment today that is rising and falling, just like some tides, moving up, moving down. We're going to look at some NCAA teams that maybe are moving up in Brian and I's rankings, and maybe some to stay away from until we learn a little bit more, or we just learn maybe some auto fades coming up. And as we always wrap it, we got your best bets. We have your extra money opportunities where we give you a plus money play to hopefully be able to line your pockets a little bit. So without any further ado, that's what we have coming up. And let's get right into it with the league that continues to roll on. It's indoor lacrosse, and it is the NLL. And Brian, moneyline dogs winning outright for really the first time all season with some regularity in this past week, week 11, week 10. We kind of have like a 2-week recap to do for you folks since we didn't have our episode last week. But with the NLL, I know that you're tuned into this stuff, Brian. What have you kind of been tracking?
Yeah, it's a real big shame that we didn't have a recap or an episode 4 recap last week, because in week 11, it was the first week of the season where the moneyline favorites didn't overwhelmingly win. And then in week 12, it went right back to normal. So we missed the biggest anomaly, but it was the most exciting week of games because you had the most uncertainty about who was going to win. And, we talk all the time about we used to over the summer, we didn't know who was going to win going into the PLL weekends. We were just like, hey, the +1 home 5 is always a great option.
Yeah, exactly. 2.5. Oh my God, bet your whole bankroll. Yeah.
Yeah. Now it's like, we're like, oh, the Seals are, going to go out there and crush whoever they're going to crush this week. So it made it for a really interesting weekend of indoor lacrosse. But also, scoring was super low. It was the lowest scoring week of the whole season per game.
You got to love that, Mr. Under. You got to be loving that low scoring.
I did, because in the week prior, I called it, because that was the week
You're right.
that the totals were really high, and or the total lines were really high.
Yep.
And the scoring's been super volatile. So it's getting really hard to track some of these things because, going back to week 9, that was previously the lowest scoring week, but week 10 is the second highest scoring week. And then week 11 took the crown for the lowest scoring week. So the scoring is just week to week. You start having to get into these matchup centric analyses that as the season is going on, it's going to be more feasible to do. but it's going to make it more interesting than kind of just going, hey, the books for some reason went up 2 points in the totals, in their total lines, like across the board. So that's something we might want to look into because there's still some low scoring games. Now the scoring is like, 1 week teams, the Mammoth are scoring 18 on the Warriors and the Warriors are still putting up 15. And then next week it's 9-4. So like there's a lot of dynamics going on, and that's really nice to see because, we're still at a 75% win rate for the moneyline favorites. So just a little bit of volatility this week, though, really back to week 12, like really back to normal. The only upset I think we had, if I remember correctly, was the Mammoth over the Rush, which wasn't really a dog win. It was just the books have for some reason put them at plus 130. And I'm sad that I was away because I wanted to bet it so bad. I saw that immediately.
Isn't that how it always works? I mean, I say that all the time. Like you win 100% of the plays that you don't bet. Like the ones that you don't bet are the absolute locks right there. But to your point, Brian, that's why this show that we do for the folks on a typically weekly basis, or the things we're putting out on Twitter, why they're so valuable is because you garner this information the entire season, and then you understand that that's an outlier line. That's probably one of the best value plays that you're going to have all year. And if you're not paying attention to it every week, you're not going to be able to purse through and know this is one of my favorite plays. And still, you want to practice good bankroll management. So even if it's one of your favorite plays, if you have $100 in your account, go put $99 on the bet just because, oh my goodness, everything is telling me that this is wrong. Maybe if you're a $10 bettor and this is one that you're really comfortable about, you venture into going a little bit higher to $15 or $20. And if you lose it, you can still feel good. It's still money that you can afford to lose. Don't have it be the money that you got to pay to keep your lights on in your house. But if you have those opportunities that you feel really good about, like that line that you were just talking about, that's your opportunity to go from a 2% bet to a 3% or a 4% or a 5% if your bankroll allows for it. Those are the opportunities. And if you're not paying attention all year, you're going to be flipping coins. You're not going to have enough information to feel like you're that comfortable to up your unit size, right?
Yeah, and it's been kind of enlightening in a way to track it a little bit more seriously ever since the inception of the betting report. Because prior to that, I was just kind of like going off of like intuition about like whatever. And but the Mammoth have, and I think this is why the books have kind of slipped up on this one, is the Mammoth have kind of been sneaking by a little quietly.
True.
And maybe you could attribute it a little bit to maybe strength of schedule arguments. But like, when you talk to me about like who I think the best teams in the league are right now, based just off the top of my head, I'm going like Seals, Bandits, Thunderbirds.
Yep.
Right.
And
but
Bandits
like,
are my
right
absolute favorite. I mean, I've been saying that since before week 1, that I just think the chemistry they brought into the year already behooved them very well, especially with the layoff that really the whole entire league had. So I've been screaming Bandits from the rooftops, and they've made me out to at least look semi-competent when trying to follow along with some of these NLL teams.
But the Mammoth are right there with all of them, and
true. But not so overtly so to speak. What I mean? I think a little bit more under the radar. I think a great point by you.
So I think that's something that like they miss. But all you have, like looking at the standings, the Rush have 2 wins. So like it's an easy thing that's like an easy thing to spot. But you might just like scroll by it if you're not paying attention to the Mammoth specifically for whatever reason, because they're not on your mind. Maybe they're just not your favorite team. So being able to track it or have like a collective piece of information that shows you stuff like that, like the betting report, it's really, I look at that real fast and then I look at the lines, and some weeks, not every week, like this week where we can talk about a little bit, the board is not jumping out at me really that heavily, but some weeks you just see something that it's like, who approved that?
Yeah, exactly. And that there's some intern or some lower level person on the totem pole at DraftKings or MGM or Caesars or wherever you're betting these games that then is in their risk room that they're like, God damn it, Carl, you told us you knew lacrosse. Like, what the hell is wrong with you? So you also know, you can tell that Brian's getting better at this as an expertly slid in plug for the PLL and NLL betting reports right there. Expertly done by you, Brian. You can get on the wait list. Just reach out to us. We'll let us know how you can do that. As I'm looking up and down this week as well, I know that you have a best bet that's going to be coming up from the NLL. So we'll get to that here in a little bit, but I'm with you. Nothing was really jumping out at me. I've been burnt so many times betting with my heart over my head. Do I want to back the Wings as an underdog again? I do. Does my bankroll want me to? Nope, because I've already been burned doing that how many times. Nothing was really jumping out at me, but when we were talking with Hutton before the show, he kind of pointed out that the Warriors, which is a team that I've been pretty high on, I thought that we were getting some value on them early. They came down to earth a little bit, but now they're surging again. They're on a 3-0 run right now. I just took a glance at the future odds. They're 28-1. So that's plus 2,800. I say all the time, I don't like tying my money up in a future. I maybe place, 1% of my bankroll, if that, in futures for the entire season. But at plus 2,800, 28-1, is there enough value on what the Warriors are doing right now to make it a play-on situation if you compare it to a team like the Rush, who are below them at 16-1 plus 1,600, and they're below them in the standings? So is there enough value on situations like that to maybe get some money out of your pocket and then set yourself up for a hedge opportunity? Or do you think these top dogs that we already know that are a little bit more established, maybe just bet on them on a weekly basis? Like, how do you approach that? Because I thought it was an interesting point that our man Hutton brought up.
I think that, like, going through the whole, hedging during the course of the season is, like, really interesting. It's something that I don't generally pay attention to as much, because once you get to the playoffs, like, anything in the world can happen. And I hate placing bets too far in advance of the playoffs because the environment totally changes. And, one upset in the playoff matters way more than one upset during the season. So if you get caught off guard in the playoffs and your team is out, it feels like wasted money to me.
Yeah.
Where you're kind of betting on them to win multiple successive games as the time goes on, rather than like, hey, maybe they win one game this weekend. So
yeah.
But at the same time, I do think there's a lot of merit for the Warriors. They're like right in the middle of the pack, like top of the middle group of the standings. Don't currently have Mitch Jones. I do think that they have to show that they can get past the Mammoth, because I think, as we keep talking about them, I think they are like the gatekeeper team. Like, if you can't beat the Mammoth, I don't think you're going to beat anybody above them in a meaningful way or at a meaningful time in the season.
And when I'm talking about these futures, I don't say it because, the Warriors are on a run right now, like, let's get them in at 28-1, and then we're going to make all this money because they're going to win the title. More so, what I look to do with a future ticket is, once it gets to the playoffs, and as the playoffs are currently constructed in the NLL, in the second round and the finals, it's not just a one and done. It's going to be a 3-game series. So in those 3-game series, this is a theory that I follow along with in the NHL playoffs, in the MLB playoffs, in the NBA playoffs. When you have games that are a series on a night-to-night basis, the odds can fluctuate so heavily that if you have a team who goes in a 2-0 hole, and you can potentially hedge a bet in that way. And when we're saying hedging, basically it's guaranteeing yourself money. Like, if you have a 28-1 live dog and the Warriors are in a playoff series and they go up 1-0 in a playoff series. And this is completely hypothetical, right? This is assuming they would get to the second round. This is assuming that they win that first game. So again, completely hypothetical. They go up 1-0. Now, even if it's, plus 105, if it's, plus 110 for the other team that they're facing off against, you then hit them to win the series. And either you're going to get through that series with a 28-1 ticket live, or you're making back your initial investment. Let's say it was $10. So then you do a 105 at another $10. So you're making, 50 cents there, but at least you didn't lose any money, and when you're playing the long game of sports betting, people think the long odds are really what matter. No, making smart bets with your money is what really matters. And I just think it's an interesting conversation. I'm not telling you to go place on the Warriors right now. I'm not telling you to go place on the Rush. I'm not telling you to go place these long odds. I just think, as we aim to try and make people a little bit more informed on ways to be profitable long-term sports betting, it's not just a here and now kind of thing. You really have to weigh your options for a whole entire year to try and keep making money, to try and keep your bankroll alive. Like, does that kind of make sense? Or did I just go on a complete rant that just satiated myself?
No, that makes a lot more sense. And I think that's something that I would like to experiment with in the future.
Yeah. Like before the season, you know what I mean? Like, now that we've seen some of these teams with the PLL, when we start going into the summer, when those odds that we can compare to last year's championship odds and can compare to how the year ended up closing, you could maybe find some really good opportunities there. But I'm kind of with you as far as the in-season stuff goes. I don't think I would be trying to set up a hedge right now, because I think if there's one thing that we've learned is money line favorites are great, but there's a lot of volatility in these markets, Brian.
One thing that we're seeing is, in particular, like with the Rush having good odds in general, favorites against Mammoth, the 1600 futures, like blah, blah, blah. How much of that are they weighing with historical data? Right. And we have talked in the past about, especially the NLL, they haven't played in 2 years. How much does that even matter? But even in sports, usually there's a lot of turnover. Like, in college, how many seniors are graduating? In pro sports, it's particularly like football, like how many big player movements are happening. And one thing that's interesting about lacrosse that kind of separates it from pro lacrosse in general, that kind of separates it from those, are the amount of player movements that we typically see. Because we always complain about the offseason. We're not seeing that part of the offseason entertainment isn't really prominent in the sport yet. So I think year to year, so particularly applicable for the PLL or the next NLL season, using that historical data to kind of inform a long-term futures bet could actually be a really good idea to maybe experiment with like some pizza money and develop a strategy like that throughout the season, just to kind of see how it works.
Yeah. And also, these are conversations that nobody in the lacrosse betting space is talking about other than us right now. Like truly, I have listened to different shows. I've listened to, I follow different people on Twitter. No one is talking about the macro level ways of potentially, I don't want to say beating the system, but setting yourself up with positive expected value bets. People are just talking about who's winning games, who's losing games. But in the sports betting world, if you are beating the closing line, if you are getting the better number, if you are making more positive expected wagers, positive expected value wagers than not, at the end of the year, whether it's 5 cents or $500, you're going to be a profitable bettor. And not even every year it's going to be guaranteed, but in the long game, if you're doing those kind of things, you are going to be a profitable bettor. And you could just only bet lacrosse and be a profitable bettor by being smart. Like yes, knowing what teams are better. Yes, knowing what other lines are moving, and what other players are moving. That stuff is all important, and it will make you a more informed lacrosse handicapper, a more informed lacrosse bettor. But at the end of the day, sports betting, whether it's tiddlywinks or curling or lacrosse or football, it is a numbers game. What does the line tell me? What does the market tell me? And how does that compare to my numbers? I think fascinating conversations right there rolling around. He's Brian Andrews. I'm Dan Alexander. That's some thoughts that we just had, and just kind of completely off the rails on some hedge opportunities and how to be a plus EV bettor. That you're not finding that on any other lacrosse podcast. I guarantee it. I will take that to the bank right there, Brian. You're not hearing that anywhere else.
And we haven't even started talking about college yet.
Oh yeah. That's a perfect natural segue. NCAA field lacrosse happening right this very second. We're going to get into a little rising and falling segment. Want to find out what teams Brian is kind of getting high on, maybe some teams that he's looking to fade moving forward, or just kind of wait and see. I have a couple thoughts on that as well, but I want to start with something that I started tracking since the first week of lines. every Division I lacrosse game does not have a line on it. Some of them have spreads, but don't have money lines, depending on how high that spread ends up getting up. So this is based off of available lines on DraftKings, which is the flagship of betting NCAA lacrosse as it stands right now. So week 1, we talked about this 13-1. Or 13-1, excuse me. Moneyline favorites were cleaning up, but the favorites against the spread only 7-7. So in week 2, moneyline favorites again cleaning up. 7-1 straight up were your favorites on the money line, but falling back to the pack a little bit. Still better than the first 500 week, but 5-3 were those favorites against the spread. So one of the best ATS weeks for favorites thus far in the NCAA season. In week 3. Dogs were barking a little bit last week. I'll tell you what, 8-5 moneyline favorites. So a lot of parlay busters in there. If you were one of the people who backed UNC, I don't know why I'm wearing my my Tar Heel blue right now, because I was not a happy fan of the UNC Tar Heels last week. Blew up a couple parlays for me. 8-5, the moneyline favorites, and this is the first week that the ATS favorites, the dogs are really barking. 8-5, the underdogs against the spread last week. And so far this week, just so, for what it's worth, we had a Duke game, we had a UNC game, 2-0, the ACC keeps on rolling, 2-0 on the money line, but both of them didn't cover. The dogs barking here early in week 4, and I'm loving it, Brian, because I love my dogs. I love my plus money. 0-2 against the spread were favorites. For what it's worth, both unders hit. I'm going to go back and look at some of the data, crunch some totals, and maybe have that for you next week. So overall, I'll give you these numbers and get your reactions of if it surprises you, if it kind of confirms what you've been seeing. For you math majors out there, get your abacuses out, add those all up. Overall, on the money line, favorites are 30-7. You heard me correctly, 30-7. So when Brian and I told you, maybe laying the chalk and taking some parlays, even though we're not parlay guys, might be profitable for you. Maybe not so last week, but overall, 30-7 money line favorites, and favorites against the spread, actually a non-profitable endeavor. 17-20 you're against the spread favorites. So that means dogs backing them blindly on the spread are slightly above 500, but with a bigger sample size pool. And I would never suggest blindly betting anything. You might be breaking just about even with maybe some of the juice that you would be laying. 17-20, or I guess the better way to say it, 20-17 dogs against the spread. Those numbers surprise you? Kind of back up what you thought already, Brian? What do you think when you hear 30-7 for the money line favorites, 20-17 for the ATS doggos?
30-7, not even a little bit of a surprise. It's just what early season college lacrosse is. You go in, the top 20 teams, they're not scheduling, like the ACC is not scheduling the ACC generally in February because they want time to develop before they have to play those teams for bids into the tournament. So it's not surprising. I've been surprised. There have been plenty of surprising. A lot of those 7 upsets were really fun to watch and are very exciting. And a lot of those covers from the dogs were also exciting and from unexpected teams. So I'm not necessarily surprised at the majority of the covers coming from the dogs. But I didn't expect it to be that close. If you asked me to guess out of the 37 games, I wouldn't have guessed that close. I actually would have put it in favor of the favorites because there have been also some just absolutely.
Well, when Syracuse is what they were like 9.5 point favorites, they cover the 9.5 and they cover the over by themselves. I would probably come to that same conclusion, but there you have it. 20-17, the dogs barking against the spread here early in NCAA action. Let's get into this rising and falling section of the show. I think that a great idea, Brian, so that we could just have a little bit more of a overarching view of what's happened so far in NCAA action. I'll start off with some of the teams that are rising up for me. I think Ohio State has shown a lot here early. I think last week, and I feel like UNC is probably going to be a team that's on our falling list for both of us, Brian, but 20-8 I don't care who you beat an ACC team 20-8. You're going to perk up. Like you're going to have me interested right there. I will get into UNC in just a second. Ohio State, a team that's rising for me. They have a game in Naples, and you're actually going to be hearing about Ohio State a little bit later in our best bet segment. Stay tuned for that. I also am really high on the Ivy League as a whole. I just think after they didn't get a season last year while other teams were playing, I think they almost have this kind of little brother isn't the term, but like a chip on their shoulder where, oh, you guys got to play last year. I think they almost view last year as a bit of an asterisk year, where they maybe say, yeah, sure, Virginia, amazing job. You came on late at the end of the year, but you didn't have to play our Yales. You didn't have to play our Browns, who I think they might be a little bit better than people have expected as well. Harvard, we'll see what they have. They already have a win under their belt. It was against NJIT, so I don't know how much stock I put in that. Last one for me that is rising. We haven't seen them in 2 weeks, but they're my play-on team anytime they're getting points. The Utes, the Utah Utes, I think with their new head coach, I think they have a lot that they're going out to prove. They've not made me out to be a liar. They're 2-0 against the spread right now. They're 1-1 overall with a big win on the road as a 2.5-point dog against Vermont. And Vermont, I know, is a team that you're pretty high on, Brian. Who else is some of the teams that you think are rising up and some teams that maybe could be play on moving forward for you?
I definitely like your list. I'm not putting the Utes on my list because I was already high on them at the beginning of the season.
So they can't rise much more. Yeah.
So I'm just prefacing that before anyone is like, how could you forget? Do you have short-term memory loss? I don't know. But my low-hanging fruit is Jacksonville because I thought Utah and Vermont were going to be better than Jacksonville. But, that could be a little bit of ignorance. Delaware, I know they were on the cusp of like the 20 spot in like the preseason polls, but they've been keeping up with some teams that have been kind of unexpected and they've been really fun to watch. And they have a couple kids on defense that can play. UMass is another team. I used to love UMass back in the day. They were one of the teams that I rooted for in like, middle school and high school and stuff. But they kind of went away for a while. And but they played Army really, really tight. Another team that I've been having really fun watching is St. Joe's.
Yeah.
Shout out to Coolin, but they kept up with Delaware, and I was really not expecting that. I thought Delaware was probably going to cover, and I actually took Delaware in a money line parlay that got ruined last week, like you were joking about. So I'm a victim of your joke.
Yeah.
And
I feel like you, me, and every other listener of the show, and anybody else who has been money line parlaying favorites, those heels got us last week, man.
Yeah, I know. But the fact that they almost took Delaware, that was the first one I clicked when I was putting together like a 3-team money line parlay. I was like, all right, St. Joe's is a good team. That's fine. But like Delaware had shown that they were going to definitely be somewhere in the top 20. And I didn't think that St. Joe's was necessarily going to be it, but they looked really clean. They were playing really well and they were really hyped. And also it was really cool because they have individualized goal songs for their players. And I love that trend.
I love that.
I can't wait for that to keep expanding into other programs.
Like Rocket League, like you get to pick your own goal song and everything.
Yeah. So I love that. I hope they keep that energy going. But my list for who I think is going down is a lot longer. So maybe you want to
and actually that works out perfectly because mine is really, I think it's a little too early for me, for really, both of these teams. I think we just wanted to get something out here as, just a baseline of where to start with teams that we're maybe getting a little higher on that are falling back a little bit. So for me, really the only team that has really dropped down in my rankings is UNC. And really, I'm hoping it's more of a youth issue than a culture issue that hopefully, an experienced coach is able to reel this in a little bit and get this close D because there's just a lot of youth and inexperience that's in front of Krieg right now. And Krieg had maybe his worst game as a Tar Heel in that loss against Ohio State. I mean, he really was not seeing it. We're recording here on a Wednesday and a huge bounce back by Krieg in the game today against Brown. He ends up with 17 saves and he was standing on his head. I mean, Brown was in a position to win that game Krieg slammed the door shut on that with what he was doing in goal.
Did you see the backpedal goal?
Oh my God. Unreal.
Backpedaling and
Unreal.
Offside and
Unreal. Like that, yeah. It was disgusting. I actually had indigestion just watching what he was doing right there. So great bounce back spot by him. If he can stand on his head and give an opportunity for some of these close defense, because I think they have talent for sure. It's just really raw talent. And offensively, they're just out of sync right now. The only two that really have much chemistry is Gray and Solomon. I think Gray is still in the running for being a Tewarton finalist. Terrific play out of him. If they could just get a little bit more chemistry, a lot of unforced turnovers that they're doing. So I don't want to write UNC off just yet, but they need to figure it out in a hurry. So that's really my big falling. I know that's one that you agree with, but who else is kind of on your list?
This pains me to say it because I was really excited that they made the tournament last year very unexpectedly and almost beat Notre Dame. But
Philly boy.
Yeah. Drexel's not having a good time right now. No. And okay, UMBC was also maybe Drexel was probably 2019, maybe. They did have some graduations, which would negatively affect any team. But they were definitely ahead of UMBC. And Drexel's the team that busted my moneyline parlay, which makes me extra sad. But that's not the only reason. That's not the only reason they're on this part of the list. They were keeping up with UMBC. So they're definitely still that caliber of team. They just let UMBC go on a little bit of a run. And then every time Drexel started to get momentum, they just UMBC scored again and squashed whatever momentum they could garner. So I was all right, first game of the season for them, whatever, no big deal. And then they lose to Lafayette. So now I'm getting a little nervous. How bad can it be? Did they what's the rest of their schedule looking like? They have to bounce back fast, I think. Otherwise the momentum's just going to slip from them and
Great point.
They're not going to be able to recover.
Yeah.
Other than them, Loyola after the Hopkins game, stock's real low on them right now. I think if you find a team like Vermont or Utah or Jacksonville or maybe even Marist, and you can get 5 or 6 points on them, given to any of the teams I just listed against Loyola, that might be an immediate hammer for me because it would be for Hopkins as well.
Good point.
So Loyola is now kind of a target for me as one of the teams that's generally accepted as the top 15.
Yeah.
That if a team on the bubble or a team in the 15 to 25 range is getting, more than 5 points.
Yeah, and I also think they have a pretty interesting matchup coming up this weekend. It does Loyola, so it'll be kind of interesting to see, how they kind of bounce back after that loss. Now they're going to be playing a Rutgers team who I was kind of a little bit lukewarm on. I think they impressed me last week. Kirst was having a great game. So Rutgers 2.5-point favorites against Loyola. I think to your point, we're going to learn a lot about Loyola this week. They're at home. Do they fall into an 0-3 hole? I think your point's a good one.
And then besides that, Lehigh, but I think that kind of speaks for itself right now. I think, bad loss, but we'll see how they go. But Sox kind of it's on a slow decline right now.
Yeah.
Not much to say about it. It was just a bad loss.
And honestly, I look at the Ivy League as a league that I'm kind of high on. I probably look at the Patriot League as a league that, if they're going up against some stronger competition, I'm probably always going to be leaning the other way. It's just unfortunate because the Patriot League, I feel is always going up and going down, and maybe they have that one standout team, but we'll see moving forward. And we both agree on UNC. I don't think we can say much more about the disappointing start of the season for UNC. So Brian, any other little tidbits to throw in before we get the folks some actionable info here to wrap up the show?
No, I think we should get into the bets.
Let's get into it. You're simply the best. Oh, yeah. Nothing feels. I know you missed that song last week. As I missed rolling with my guy Brian on his best bet. And I believe you're going to that indoor turf, a little box lacrosse action, your best bet for the folks on the Bet on Lacrosse show, Brian Andrews.
So we were talking earlier, it was probably an hour ago at this point, but because we've been rambling, but
We have
the Mammoth were not favorites against the Rush. They were plus 130 or something on the money line, which was ludicrous. And now they're minus 105 and the Rush are minus 125. So the Rush are still the favorites. And I was like trying to figure out why. And generally teams who have played teams 2 times in a row, if they win the first game, they're not always winning the second game. So I guess a little matchup knowledge has been helping teams come back and like recoup and beat the team that just beat them. I don't think the Rush are going to be able to do that with the Mammoth. Between Dylan Ward and the lack of offensive production on the Rush's side, every time I watch the Rush, their offense never seems organized enough. And I feel like too many times they're taking shots at the end of the shot clock that are just like by the restrainer. And I'm never like, ooh, that was a really nice team play. Usually it's Mark Matthews, like bowling through 8 people, or, you know, someone having like a really nice dodge and crease dive or something. I just don't see the Rush game planning well enough for the Mammoth when their offensive production has just this season been lacking. So I'm hammering the Mammoth money line at minus 105.
I need to get a hammer sound in this board, like working on the railroad or something like that. I'll have that for you for next week. Mammoth money line at a beautiful price. I'm going to be rolling with my guy Brian on that one. I hope you do as well. I'm going under for my best bet, under 26.5 in Ohio State taking on Harvard. Ohio State hasn't scored under 17 goals yet this year. Yes, I know that. But the teams they played, Cleveland State, Detroit Mercy, and UNC, and I think UNC has a little bit of work to do defensively. It was 20 goals. I'll give them that one. But the other one against Cleveland State and Detroit Mercy, that's 14 goals per game by Cleveland State and 21 goals per game for Detroit Mercy that they've been being allowed. And in Harvard's lone game this year, they played NJIT, and that team, 24 goals that this team's letting up per game. I don't see enough in this game. And it's going to be played in Naples, Florida. So this is 2 teams that play in the cold that, I'll have my fingers crossed that maybe they're having some extracurricular activities down there as well, hanging out in Naples, Florida, maybe not paying attention to the game as much. Under 26.5, I think the number is a bit inflated because both of these teams have been putting up goals in bunches, and Ohio State is only allowing 8 goals per game. They have allowed 24 total goals in their 3 games. That's 6th in the nation. So give me under in the Ohio State and Harvard game. And that brings us to our EMOs. All bat leadoff. You can wrap it all for us, Brian, as we talked earlier about moneyline favorites in the NCAA. 30-7 straight up. I'm not a parlay guy, but there's been some serious value betting parlays in early NCAA action. I don't love any of the straight out plus money plays. So let's do a 3-teamer. Statistically, if you're betting 3-team parlays, it is the best true odds that you're going to get betting a parlay. So give me Maryland over Princeton. Give me Duke over Penn. Give me Rutgers over Loyola. That allows you to take a minus 625, a minus 370, and a minus 255 favorite, tie it all, put a little bow on it, and end up with a plus 105 payout. Maryland, Duke, Rutgers, moneyline parlay, plus 105 on DraftKings is my extra money opportunity. What do you got for the folks, Brian?
I'm following you outside, and I am looking at Jacksonville versus Denver. Jacksonville, which has shown that they can play with the top 10 teams, which Denver traditionally has been, and the books don't like Jacksonville for some reason. Put them at plus 200 on the money line, and I think the argument for that play speaks for itself. Do I think it's a certainty? No. But at that price, you're getting more money if it hits, than I would have expected if I were to set that line. So I think that's a pretty simple play.
Plus 200. You don't have to do much pulling on my leg to get me riding with that one. So to recap, the EMOs, Jacksonville money line taking on Denver. That's Brian, plus 200 on DraftKings. I'm going a 3-teamer, Maryland, Duke, Rutgers. That's plus 105 money line parlay on DraftKings. And for our best bets, I'm taking an under. I know you probably are having like a cardiac arrest. Like, what? Dan is taking an under in the best bet? Brian's won me around, and I'm going under Ohio State University and Harvard. The total in that one, 26.5. I also would wait until Saturday to place this because I think there's going to be a lot of love for the over when people look at the goals that these two teams have scored. So for the official show pick, under 26.5, I think you might get some better juice. This may even end up at even money, or it might move a whole entire point. You get under 27.5, and I like it even more there. But for the show, under 26.5, and Brian going to box, minus 105, Mammoth money line, his best bet. I love it. And that's our thoughts on the NLL and NCAA slate. Make sure you follow us on the socials at Bet On Lacrosse, at Pro Lacrosse Bets. Sign up too. You want the info we're sharing with you every week at the touch of a mouse. Bet On Lacrosse report. Reach out to us. We'll let you know how you can get on that wait list. And let us know who you're betting on this week. Reply when we get our best bets out there. Any of the stuff, chirp at us on Twitter at Bet On Lacrosse. And make sure you tune in. Make sure you tell your friends. Make sure you drop a review as we preview these NLL, these NCAA lines, and summer's right around the corner too, and help you Bet On Lacrosse. For Brian Andrews, I'm Dan Alexander. Cash those tickets, and we'll talk to you next week.